Good morning and thank you very much for joining us. I am Yori Folani. And well, my guest in studio, we've got Comrade Nelson Ekujimi. Comrade Nelson Ekujimi is a political analyst and an election observer. As always, Comrade, it's great to have you on.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Good morning to have you.
Indeed, our pleasure. Later on, we will be joined by another guest from our Abuja studio. Okay. The EU report, the European Union Election Monitoring Report, has caused quite a stir because they've put out a report that is not favorable at all, as you know, to INEC's conduct of the election. And indeed, as far as they are concerned, they would say that there are issues with the election. And the other interesting thing is that one of the complainants at the Presidential Election Tribunal they've actually submitted the EU report as evidence, whatever evidence it is of, because it is not EU that is in the tribunal, but still they've submitted evidence. We'll see how all of that goes. They've taken it on temporarily, pending when the objections that were raised by President Tinubu's lawyers. They said that they'll come back and tell what the objection was to their presenting it. But in the meantime, in the interest of fairness, no doubt, the court has said, okay, temporarily put it in there. Now, so all of this is coming down to EU report and matters arising. We said on the program earlier, not today, earlier in the week, that we reminded that Dele Alaki, presidential spokesman, has said that, well, generally speaking, it seems like a poorly done desk-ridden job. Where were they? How many places did they visit? What is their sample for which they can now make statements such as they have made, questioning the integrity of Nigeria's elections? So I guess those kind of things we'll look at in as part of the matters arising. But this is a good opportunity to get your impression, because we haven't seen Nelson since the report was submitted. So what has been your perspective? Because you are an observer. You and a lot of Nigerian colleagues have been all around. Unfortunately, you Nigerian people didn't put your own reports out so that the ground would have been full by the time they bring in their own reports. No,
the 2023 general election was observed by about 230 observer groups, both locally and internationally.
Okay.
Locally, we have about 296, if I'm correct, and 33 international bodies. We had ECOWAS, we had EU, we had Commonwealth, we had international, we had embassies and what have you. One would have expected the party to the tribunal who submitted the EU report to have also tried to get the reports of the remaining about 229 observer groups that have covered this election. We have written our own reports.
Okay, but those ones were not saying what they wanted to hear. Apparently, it's only EU that is now saying what they want to hear.
Yes, I think that is so. So for me, we have seen the reports. On going through that report, one feels scandalized that some group of people can, fritter away the resources of the EU to come up with such a report. For the information of our viewers, that 2023 election was conducted in 176,606 polling units. So, as a research student, one of the critical tenets of research methodology is reliability and validity. If you are going to conduct a research on, say, a particular population, it is always expected for you to get an accurate, and reliable data, that your sample size must be representative of the general population you are researching into. So I want to implore people. I've heard that EU had maybe 51 or 110 to juxtapose 110 out of 176,000. That mathematics is just not there at all.
You don't even have to be a university statistics fellow to understand that
110
that cannot
to
be a
176.
useful sample.
And you see, the funniest thing for me was that report showed clearly that the manufacturers had a hidden agenda. It showed that they were totally ignorant of the provisions of Nigeria's Electoral Act. So if you have developmental partners like the EU Election Observation Mission coming up with such a report, people that are supposed to help you, to be your friend, to help you, in advancing whatever you are doing, whatever their shortcomings, then I don't think you need an enemy. It shows clearly. And that is why some of us, in looking at that report, we are going to make a strong-worded petition to the EU itself to interrogate the personnel who drafted that report.
But part of the other thing to consider, and here I am just speculating, let me emphasize speculating. The EU, even though it's not a human, has its ears and has been listening. A lot depends on who or what you're listening to. Has been listening to commentary coming out of Nigeria, because you've just made the point that, look, we have what,
176,606.
Yeah, and only what do they cover there? Yet they are forming judgment. Because if this had been a business survey, I wonder how useful such a survey will be.
It will be trashed.
Because this
it does not make sense.
Now they've put it on the ground, and that is their final report, as you recall. There are those who are celebrating it.
Absolutely.
Oh, there are those who are celebrating it.
It does life.
Some guys made a beeline for the tribunal.
Absolutely.
Say, hey, look, we have something. I said,
but like I told you,
what is it that you have?
We had 229 accredited election observer groups. So if you are celebrating one, or you are looking at one report, you need to go and look at 228 remaining. And even for the 176,606 polling units, observers were only able to deploy about 144,000 across the 200. So we couldn't cover all the polling units. We were interfacing with one another. And even the media also played a role in observing that election, because we got reportage from the media on the field.
That's right.
They spoke to observers, they spoke to the electorate, So when you look at this report, you ask yourself, did the EU sit down, the EU Observer Mission, EOM, did they sit down to look at our laws to be able to grasp how we conduct elections? That what has given them the confidence to come into our territory to interface with us, that they want to observe our election, is because they have seen that we are doing what is right. But for this body to just, for me, I believe the manufacturers of this report, I believe they just sat down in a cozy atmosphere, and they were just they were not on the field.
Look,
because I was on the field. I was the head of media and mobilization of one of the accredited observer groups, Voters Awareness Initiatives. We deployed about 150 observers onto the field. And what the EU report has come up with, even for our own 150 observers, we cannot state from our own point of view without juxtaposing it with other observer groups as well as media reportage to be able to have an appropriate assessment of the election. So for you to just deploy 110 and you are arriving at a conclusion on an election that was conducted in 176,606 polling units, it's absurd.
If it weren't this, if it were a field of study, I'm sure they themselves would be the first to say that this is the most inadequate sample with which to reach any kind of...
It is not even a sample. It's a joke. It's a joke, if you ask me.
And as you know, INEC, but not INEC alone, the presidency, the federal government, have categorically rejected this, what do they call it now? The final report. They say it's a final report. It's been categorically rejected, but they still put it, they put it out, and it is what it is. For whatever it is, for whatever it's worth, we'll see what effect they imagine it could have had on the process, and indeed, you know, everybody will be waiting to see, because we're not talking about any European Union election here. We're talking about a Nigerian election. And I don't know, you might say I'm being emotional, but you know, we have a problem with our cousins from across the ocean. You know, we do have problems with them. As you know, in a totally different context, it must be admitted, they're messing with our sexuality. They have their own thoughts on how we should conduct ourselves, no matter our culture. You know, they say this is the way it should be, and if it isn't like that, I think they've gone as far as saying that we will sanction aspects of you.
I think we must get one thing very clear. Whether elections is held in US or in Nigeria, according to democratic tenets, it is one person, one vote. Mm-hmm. And it is by universal suffrage. Mm-hmm. And that universal suffrage states that somebody above the age of 18 who has not been convicted, who has not been declared bankrupt, you know, there are conditions. And whether it is conducted in Nigeria or anywhere in the world, the conditions for you to participate is global.
Yes.
But a situation whereby you are arriving at, it's just like this election we had. For anybody to say, oh, there were no infractions, that whole person will be economical, will be the truth. But for you to come and say the election was characterized, that is a wrong use of word.
That word
characterized is wrong. It means you have done a survey and you have arrived at the conclusion that majority of places, you know, that infraction, what you would say, because those things happen, is that election also witnessed.
That's it. That's
the proper use of word.
And the opposite side of that statement is that the election was in substantial compliance.
That is what
it's not that nothing happened.
You know, the beauty of the law is that the law recognizes that we are human beings. Does not say total compliance. It said substantial. And in this, okay, for example, you take the case of Lagos, where when we had the gubernatorial election, and people were saying, oh, there were crises, and a lot of us came out and said, come on, we have 20 local governments in Lagos. Even in the 2 local governments that we have identified as where election violence occurred, how many polling units in those local governments? The number of election observers deployed by EU to cover these 2023 general elections in Nigeria is not even enough to cover a ward in my own local government.
Well, you know, they're going to say to you that, look, nowadays there are scientific approaches to fact gathering and all of that kind of a thing.
Okay. Well, if there are scientific approaches to fact gathering, in research, you must, you know, explain your research findings. Yes. You must, you know, give us the premise for us to be able, to understand and, you know, that's the way forward.
There must be a rationale for their conclusion.
For your conclusion, somebody must be able to look at it from the premise. Your conclusion must flow from and the premise must be verifiable. This was an election in which, like I said earlier on, the Commonwealth was here. They monitored the election. We saw the reports of the Commonwealth. We saw the reports of the African Union. We saw reports of the AU, of ECOWAS.
That's right.
We saw reports of so many other groups. So, for me, I don't think we should belabor ourselves with the EU report, because looking at the EU report on a scientific level, that report falls far, far below standard. That report is not even worth touching, because it's a joke, like I said earlier.
In fact, one of the sort of an NGO, MURIC. MURIC is an acronym for
Muslim
Rights Concern.
Yeah.
Muslim Rights Concern. They put out a statement. They went a bit further and said that it's very little more than a form of colonialism. You know, I said, they stepped out a bit, you know, said, look, as far as we are concerned, because you see, to make those judgments, and all those, you know, eminent chaps, ladies were among them, that we saw and that were behind this report, you begin to wonder, because you feel sure that these are knowledgeable people, otherwise they wouldn't be where they are. Absolutely. So one cannot cast any aspersions on them. But
the job they have done, they've done a shoddy job.
that was the conclusion of the Dele Alake presidential spokesman, on such matters as this. That was his conclusion as well. And that is why INEC was able, and INEC no doubt would have had those kind of things as part of its rationale in saying that it rejected in its totality all of this. Because let's talk here. Yes, there were issues. It wasn't perfect. You've stated it. And I even like what you said, that, look, to note that there were instances, to not say anything like that, but to now say the whole process was characterized by, then we say, well, we don't know. Here we go again is indeed the matter. As I said, we were also planning on having another guest, and I'm happy that Jake Ekpele, policy development and advocacy expert, is in our Abuja studio around 9. Good morning, Jake. Good morning. Yori Folani in Lagos studio here. Thank you very much for making time for us.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you,
All
sir.
right.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we're looking, Jake, at the EU report and matters arising. In studio, before you were able to join us technically, we've been talking about not quite. First of all, the report has been rejected categorically by the federal government, by INEC, and a lot of other people. There are people, no doubt, that are happy about it. As you recall, some people have rushed to the presidential election petition tribunal and have submitted it as evidence. But I wanted to ask, give me your impressions, Jake, when you saw this, that the report basically says that the entire Nigerian elections were categorized by all sorts of malpractices, and that it wasn't a true reflection. And they tried to put out there that the election was not won and rightly declared. What are your impressions, Jake, when you got wind of the report?
Well, I occupy a very strategic position, even in the context of this discussion, because the EU formed one of my projects in governance. So I want to make it clear that, number one, I don't speak for the EU. Two, my opinion here are simply my opinion and not the views of the European Union. With that said, I don't know why we are making too much, at the end of the day, literally promoting this report that we have issues with. Why can't we just look at it as a report? Yes, there are negatives. We look at the negatives. Are there positives? Are there things that we can learn from the report? Then we can learn from the report. Let me also say this, that from little research across board, very many people who are commenting on this report have not even read the report. This is a 92 pages document, 23 recommendations, 6 summarized recommendations. There are a lot of positives that is in this report. Let me also say what this report did not say, even though it's been painted to be so. This report did not in any way delegitimize the election of the president. I don't think the European Union in any way have anything against the president that is the Nigerian president today. How can we accuse them of saying that when the president of the European Union was one of the first to call the president, and their conversation is in the open space? As soon as the president was sworn in, they were the first to invite the president to come to Brussels and address the parliament. Not too many Nigerian presidents have had that privilege, and then they continue to interface with government. This is what I had expected to be done if we have any issue with the report. It would have been a diplomatic issue. Why didn't they invite the European Union ambassador and interact with her? I'm in discussion with her, And up till this moment, she has not been invited to table the issues around this report that needs to be discussed. But however, the European Union delegation here in Nigeria is not the same as the European Union Observation Monitoring Group. They're two different entities. I'm not speaking for them. But then if you also go through, because sometimes we need to look at and interrogate what we are discussing. If you go through the methodology that the observers mission use, it is rigorous, it is strategic. And so there are some quarters that will say, well, I don't like the report. And there are also some quarters that will say, I do like the report. But my own thing is, and this is the truth, every time you want to take a nation backward, every time you want to take an individual backward, take that person to his past. Once he's taken to the past, you lose your vision. And of course, you can't reckon with your future. Let's discuss the future of the electoral system, the future of technology, the future of the electoral laws, the future of the media, the role the media will play in the electoral system, the future of inclusion of women, youth, and persons with disability. There's so much to discuss. And I think the president is taking some positive steps, especially in trying to fix the economy and the issue of security. Let's not create unnecessary distraction. The report is a report. You take it or you leave it. What's the way forward? And for me, the way forward will be to interrogate the electoral system, take some of the things that they have said and move forward. Some of the things we are claiming, there's an outright condemnation of the election. That's not correct. Please, viewers and everyone listening to me, read the report for yourself. There is no outright condemnation of the election. There were some issues they pointed out with the election, and many of them were obvious. And it was obvious that they couldn't upload the election result as at when due. It was obvious that INEC didn't come out to give a timely intervention and communicate what was going on. So let's look at the positives as much as we are crying over the negative. Let's look at the positives. And I think also, to be fair, the words of the press release were too harsh. And if I were in their position, I wouldn't put out some aspect of it. Some aspect of it, yes.
Thank you very much, Jake, because it's very important what we've just heard from you, because it does serve to put some balance to the conversation, because people are looking at the report and the fact that the phraseology of the monitoring mission, that the election was characterized by so many unsavory aspects. You said that that was not the entirety of the report, and that a lot of people haven't read the report. But it has been rejected by INEC, which it is in INEC's best interest to have read the report. The federal government has also, rejected the report. And Jake, I think this is coming from, look, you have to be very careful. I'm not in any way going to get as base as to say that the EU was lying, but you know the expression, you tell enough lies, some of it will stick. And so you have people coming out now and saying, wait a minute, don't misquote what actually happened in the situation. But again, I'm ever so grateful that you have put it in the context that you have put it, that, look, people are hurt. These are interesting times, not to say desperate times. The election, it went the way it went. The percentage of the winner is what it is. So this leaves a lot of room for sensitivity, for people to be sensitive. But having said all of that, I thank you very much, Jake, for the sort of balance you bring to it. Now, in studio with me here is Nelson Ekunjimi as well. So, Nelson, a few quick words before we go on break. Jake's perspective.
I think
balance, do you think?
I want to disagree with Jake with regards to the fact that EU is not against the president. The report was not talking about the person of the presidency. The report was talking about the conduct of Nigeria's election. And as people were on the field, because some of us didn't stay inside our room, to observe the election, we were physically present. When we see reports that does not reflect reality, that tends to portray X as B, it is within our rights as active stakeholders to come out and say, wait a minute, I was there. We saw what happened. We got reports from other observers. And looking at this report, if you juxtapose it with even the petition case at the Presidential Petition Election Tribunal, you will see that two of the parties that are in court today, when the election ended, they jointly addressed a press conference that the election has been marred by malpractice, that the election should be cancelled. Even a former president of Nigeria also joined in the fray, calling for the cancellation of the election midway after the conclusion of the election. Only for these same parties again to now go their separate ways, and they were now claiming victory. So you want to ask, how can you say something is bad and you say it should be handed over to you?
Remember that Jake also pointed out that the European Union as a body is not quite the same as this election monitoring body.
It's the Election Observation Mission.
Yes.
Is a unit within the European Union.
And Jake also pointed out that the head of the union itself, was one of the first, if not the first, to reach out to President Tinubu.
It's a different ball entirely. Okay. I think we need to get it. The EU is a body. The EU has a unit on elections, a unit on human rights, a unit on climate. They have different units. So what we are saying is that this unit of the EU, the report they have done, for which we are all members of the same global community, they've done a shoddy job.
Okay.
As intellectuals, we must query it.
We've got to go on a break.
Yeah.
But stay with us, please. We'll be right back. Jake, we'll be right back.